My name is Chad Robichaux. I'm a former Force Reconnaissance Marine and was a member of a JSOC task force. Probably the closest explanation would be like undercover. And so I'm working at the premier special operations unit in the world, in my opinion. And their responsibility is to capture or kill whoever's in the top 10 list of the Taliban. Bin Laden's number 1, right? Whoever the other 9 are, that's who my unit's going after. And those people are not in Kabul, or those people are out in the FATA, the Federal Administrative Tribal Area. They're across the border in Pakistan. They where conventional military forces are not gonna go. So me and Aziz, who is not only my interpreter, but my teammate, have to go in these areas and build a reason to be there and a clandestine infrastructure to get those assaulters safely on target, to capture or kill those bad guys, and then safely get off a target. Aziz and I did that probably 100 times.
Over the years, this name has come up so many times. Chad Robichaux. After hearing all the stories of how he's impacted so many people's lives directly, I knew that I had to travel here to do this interview. Today's video, as always, is powered by Huel. We would not be able to do this without the support of Huel. Find out more with a link in the description, and I'll talk about them a little bit later on in the video.
I could not have done that job without Aziz, clearly. I mean, I'm not an Afghan, I don't live there, I don't understand the culture. All the stuff you learn, you can't learn it in a book. If I drive through this neighborhood, I need a pakul on. If I drive through this neighborhood, I need a certain scarf, and it needs to be rolled a certain way in my head. If I have this Ahmad Massoud hanging on my rearview mirror here, it's gonna get me past certain checkpoints. If I have it in another town, I'm gonna get shot. It's extremely complex. And so Aziz was the person that made that happen. And like I said, he saved my life tangibly in combat type stuff, but he saved my life every day. Like, don't walk there, don't eat that, don't talk to the person. If you talk right now, they're gonna kill us. Every single day.
The United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps in Afghanistan. We will not waver. We will not tire. We will not falter. And we will not fail.
Americans in general live in this bubble that they don't really understand the impact that American politics have on the world, and I didn't.
Join me in welcoming President George Bush and Senator John Kerry.
Aziz invites me over for the election results at his house. There's like wall-to-wall people in his house, his cousins and brothers and sisters, and all this family there, there's food. It's like a Super Bowl party. And I'm like, why would you guys care about the election? And when George Bush wins and the polls come in, everybody's cheering like their favorite team just won. And I was just blown away. So I had this deep conversation with Aziz, like, I don't get it. And then he took me to the killing pool. The pool was on top of this hill, and the Russians had built it during Russian occupation. That pool ended up later becoming an execution place for the Taliban. First thing I noticed was this, from the high dive, there was this metal cable that was hanging, that was a noose, a slip knot noose, which would have, as he said, decapitated people, and it would have decapitated people. And then in the bottom of the pool, on both ends, were just riddled in bullet holes. So they would line people up in the deep end, shallow end, and just, execute people there. Aziz took me in there, and he's like, man, if John Kerry wins the election, America gets pulled out of Afghanistan, the Taliban comes and takes over again, it matters to people in other parts of the world that you never even think about. That was an introduction to that lesson by Aziz to me through that, and it very much changed my perspective on geopolitics. He and I did an operation. We were in a place called Batakut, Afghanistan, which it's a high mountain forming area. Our command was going to get number 6. So if you think, getting Bin Laden's number 1, number 6 on the list. And so we're looking at this area, and we parked our truck in these pine trees, and walked across this field that was a farming field, but it was in middle winter, so nothing was growing there. There's a road, and this old man's like sitting on the corner, and then he starts talking to Aziz, and I could tell in Aziz's reaction it was, something was wrong. And Aziz is like, "Hey brother, we have to go." And what the old man had told him was that the Taliban was just left the area. They were driving around looking for a foreigner, which would have been me. So we start walking back across this field, and while we're walking about 100 yards off that road, 3 Hilux trucks drove behind us. They were flying Taliban flags, which was like basically like a stance of ownership, like that's their area. As they drove by, we thought they would keep driving, but then heard them hit the brakes, back up, and then they pulled on the side of the road and they started yelling. And I'm not looking back at this point. I heard a gunshot. I don't know if I heard the gun go off first or I heard the like pop of a air cracking over your head, but I heard both. And when I heard that gunshot go, I remember thinking like, they're not gonna stop. So either we run and they shoot us and kill us, or we stop and turn ourselves in, or we fight. Like, and the only option I thought at that time was to turn and fight. And when I turned around, I saw these 3 trucks, and I have a real vivid memory of this, like probably about 20 or 30 guys. But what I zoomed in on is one guy standing by the passenger door of this red Hilux truck, and he has AK-47 in his hand. I just kind of turned and lifted the rifle and fired two rounds center mass. It's only 100 yards. He went back and hit the window, and then when he fell, like I expected like a barrage of gunfire, but I think it totally shocked them that we fought back. And so instead of them firing, which is what I expected, they actually all ran. And they ran into between the vehicles, which created a convergent point. And I didn't even aim at anybody. I just aimed at that convergent point and started emptying my magazine and yelling at Aziz, move, move, move. And if you're in a gunfight, whatever your threat is, whatever's shooting at you, that's where your focus is. And so if I'm firing and Aziz is not firing, they're not looking at him moving, they're looking at me. I'm shooting and Aziz stops. I catch him out of peripheral. He stops moving and he raises his gun and shoots. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? He's stopping and shooting, kind of breaking the rules there, and drawing fire to him. I'm supposed to be covering him, drawing the fire to me. But what he had seen something I didn't. He saw a fighter come up with a RPG, which would have been coming towards me because I'm drawing the fire, a rocket propelled grenade launcher. And he stopped because I didn't see it. In the middle of him running while I was covering him, exposed himself, drew fire to himself, and shot that guy before the rocket went off. And we just ran across this field into the tree line, got in our truck and went back to the safe, took a different route, went back to the safe house. They couldn't come after us over this field. When that whole thing was happening, well, I say this thing was miraculous. I've been in gunfights and stuff like that where you see dirt flying up all around. I've never even seen dirt flying up around us. And I heard gunfire, like shooting back at us, but I never even seen one round hit in the mud. Neither one of us got hit. I didn't see any rounds impacting anywhere the whole time. I believe we were divinely protected. So my 8th and last deployment, I came home and I was diagnosed with PTSD. Over that course of that time, you're talking 15 friends. And by the way, just people tallying it up, the 12 of those were Afghans. And people might not think, oh, that's not as big of a deal as U.S. service members. These Afghans that died, like, I ate in their homes. I played soccer with their kids. They were like brothers to me. I loved them and they loved me, and I would have died for them and they would have died for me. In fact, I do believe they did die for me. And so losing those friends, having a compromise on an operation, having a bomb driven in my house, being abducted by a foreign intelligence agency, like all these bad things happen. And I come home from that last deployment and I'm diagnosed with PTSD. I'm dealing with debilitating panic attacks, anxiety, depression, and I'm totally embarrassed. I worked my whole life to be there, Marine Corps, and then go to infantry, and then Recon, and then Force Recon, and then on this JSOC task force, and get picked to do this premier operation as AFO. I worked my whole life to get to this point, and then I failed. I was embarrassed. At jiu-jitsu, I felt like I found a cure. As soon as I slap hands and bump knuckles with my partner, my mind is there in that moment, it's present. I have to be thinking about what's happening there in that moment, because if not, my buddy's gonna choke me. So your mind is totally engaged and present. And it's for my life as a kid, having hardship in my home, that was very coping to me. My father was a very violent man, very angry man, lots of alcohol, women, physically abusive, physically beating my mom, me. Growing up that way, I came to the decision at some point in my life, I don't know when it was, but to decide, am I gonna be who my dad was, or am I gonna be completely opposite of that? And I was like, if I ever have kids, I will never treat my kids the way I was treated. My grandmother wanted me to be around something positive, so she dropped me off at a martial arts school. So at this young age of 5 years old, I was introduced to judo and traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. I've never stopped training since.
Fighting out of Magnolia, Texas, presenting Chad Robichaux.
Yield up, but that was a nice knee there.
That was. Mouthpiece comes flying out.
Here we go. Front to the right. How really tight is it?
He's done.
I love jiu-jitsu, and I think it's a really healthy thing for me, and I think it's a healthy thing for people that are trying to cope, but it has to be balance. That can't be the only thing. And I made it the only thing. Opened the school, had like 1,000 students in my jiu-jitsu school, which means I was making a lot of money, undefeated as a professional fighter. I'm crushing it as an athlete, but at home still dealing with anxiety, depression, panic attacks. I start seeking relationships with other women because my marriage fell apart. I never wanted to be like my dad, but now I'm a tyrant to my wife and kids. I'm throwing things, breaking things, screaming at them like a Marine Corps drill instructor. And so that was totally out of character. I was behaving that way. My wife and I separated. My wife filed for divorce. We sold our home, filed 2 separate 12-month leases on apartments. And about 3 months into that, I had signed a contract to fight for Strikeforce. The UFC had just bought Strikeforce. So it was the number two show in the world at the time. I was 15-0. They wanted me to fight this kid, Humberto De Leon, who's an upcoming stud. Every round, he'd punch me in the face and knock me down. I kicked him in the head, knocked him down. I even kicked him in the face and knocked his mouthpiece out a few times. It was like a good Rocky Balboa back and forth fight. The fight was over 3 rounds, and I'm going to my corner who won? One judge calls it for Humberto De Leon. The other judge calls it for me. It's going to be a split decision, and I think I just lost my first professional fight. And then the third judge calls for me. I win. My hands raised. When you're in the middle of that cage, it's super deafening, right? You're in the center of that whole thing, and everybody's screaming. It's super loud, and everything kind of went quiet, and I went in my own head. And I'm looking at these 10,000 people screaming, and everything's just quiet. And I'm thinking, I just fought so hard for this win on my record, but meanwhile, I'm not fighting for the most important things in my life. Of all those 10,000 people, my family wasn't there. And I went out of that ring night with my head held low and pretty ashamed of myself. And I'm laying there in my bed by myself. My mind was spinning. After a big fight like that, you can't just go to sleep, right? My mind's spinning, and I started thinking about all the people in my life that I was mad at, my dad, people in the military, my wife for never understanding me, I had this attitude everybody's an idiot. But then this overwhelming thought came over me that I was the common denominator, I'm the problem, and this thought landed on me that it made my family be sad without me, but they would be better off. And so I made a decision to take my life. I go in the closet in my apartment, and I take my family pictures and kind of put them on the floor around me, maybe to see my family and say goodbye. And I put that Glock 22 pistol, a 40 caliber pistol to my head. And I heard a knock on my door. When I heard my wife's voice announce herself, I panicked. I actually ran to the door because I was so enraged that she would have the audacity to come to my apartment and interrupt me killing myself. And I opened the door and I started just berating her, yelling at her for being there. In that moment, she was extremely calm. I couldn't get her to leave. I was trying to get her to leave. I'm embarrassed to say this, but it's just reality. She had a purse in her hand. I yanked her purse out of her hand and threw it over the rail because I was on the 3rd floor. And all her stuff flew everywhere. It's totally embarrassing to say that, but I was just trying to get her to leave, and she wouldn't leave. And she said something that radically changed my life, probably saved my life. We met when we were 17 and 18, so she saw me become a Recon Marine, the training to go through that. She saw me go through these schools and deployments and go to Afghanistan and do all this stuff. And she's like, how could you do all of that? And when it comes to your family, you'll quit. There's no soul-cutting word to me than be called a quitter. And she was absolutely right. I've been successful in professional things in my life, but when it came to the most important things, like being a husband, being a father, I quit all those things, including my will to live. And I'm a pretty radical decision maker. So in that moment, I made a decision to get back in the fight. I knew I couldn't do it alone, and I knew I couldn't do it with the people I'd surrounded myself by. And so my wife, while we were separated, had been going to this church. And she said, she would go to this church, not just on Sundays, every day of the week. And she said she'd be praying for me. She would go in that church and she'd pray, God, let me see Chad the way you see Chad. Let me love Chad the way you love Chad. And let me forgive Chad the way you forgave Chad. That's what she would pray for me. Knowing that I couldn't do it by myself, and knowing I couldn't do it with the people surrounded myself by, this church seemed like a place that I could tap into somebody that might come into my life and hold me accountable. So I said, this is some man at this church that you know that could help hold me accountable to this decision because we need some help. His name's Steve Toth, and I met with him at a Starbucks coffee shop. I wrote this 5-paragraph order, a military operational order of how I was gonna fix my life, and it was super good, and I was super proud of it. And I like smugly slid it over to this guy. He tapped on that paper and he said, this plan doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God. I'm not gonna waste your time, I'm not gonna let you waste mine. And so I made a decision in that moment, kind of blindly, to surrender my life to Christ, become a Christian. I found restoration in my own brokenness, in my family. I found hope again, probably for the first time in my life. I found purpose.
It's time to end America's longest war. It's time for American troops to come home. The United States will begin our final withdrawal on May 1 of this year.
So this is me and Aziz. And so all these guys worked for us in like a secret program. And this guy, his name's Bashir. And so in my book, Saving Aziz, I talk about Bashir actually turning on us to the Taliban. And I mean, this guy, like I spent nights on the side of a mountain with him on operations, like I've trusted him, like he was part of my team. So he turns over to the Taliban and ended up getting 12 of our teammates captured, 2 Americans, 10 Afghans, and they were all killed subsequently because of him. When our command caught him, he had like a notepad with him with like, Chad sleeps here. This is the time Chad left this day. This is the time Chad leaves this day. The safe is here. Like our patterns of life, everything he'd been collecting on us. He had a VBID, a vehicle-borne IED, driven into our house, leveled our house, blew up our house. So he spent a long time in the jail in Bagram. He spent some time in a jail in Robichaux, Afghanistan, and then went to Saudi Arabia, where a lot of the Afghan Taliban prisoners were. And in 2011, President Obama did a massive prisoner release. He was one of them. So he went back to the Taliban. In 2021, by that time, he was a Taliban leader. And when the withdrawal began to happen, he contacted Aziz and said, hey, you're one of the first people I'm coming for. And sent information of one of our other teammates he had already killed. And so it's when 2021, the Afghan evacs began the Afghan withdrawal began to happen. For me, like getting Aziz wasn't just going to get my friend and his wife and kids. It was very tangible, like he was going to die. Unquestionably, I could not sit back and let my friend Aziz be killed for what he did for me, for everybody listening, because I believe he's part of, fighting for freedom. And him and his wife and kids killed. So I made a decision to go back and get Aziz, his wife and 6 kids. That led to me putting a small team of special operations veterans together. It was absolutely divine orchestration of God to create this miracle that allowed us not only rescue Aziz, his wife and 6 kids, but we rescued 17,000 people. It's something that I'm just hugely humbled and honored to be a part of. And rescuing 17,000 people is the largest civilian evacuation in American history. And to be part of that, it was just incredible.
I can say on behalf of the Mulligan brothers, it's been amazing spending this time with Chad and his family and seeing an insight into what his life looked like. He is one of the hardest working guys in the space, and I really do hope you guys go check out his podcast as well, which is growing exponentially right now. I also want to say a massive thank you to Chad, who made fundraising possible and has helped me personally with stem cell treatment as well. I'm getting stem cell for my knees after my world record run, the 480 miles run. And he also has helped me get sponsorships to raise money for the charity, for my son's charity, to buy headstones for bereaved parents. So if you want to help support that, there is a giveaway for a brass monkey ice bath and also a donation link down below. And all the money goes to bereaved parents to help buy them headstones. And the documentary is coming soon, so please stay tuned for that. Thank you to Chad for making this possible. And as always, a massive thank you to our sponsor, Huel.
If you lead a busy life like me and millions of other people around the world, you might be struggling to get your nutrition in. That's where this stuff comes in, absolutely clutch. If health was easy, everyone would be doing it. But Sure make it that easy. You scoop, you shake, and you go, and you get 26 vitamins and minerals, and every single ingredient inside this and all of Hugh's other products has been expertly tested by their team to make sure you're getting exactly what you need. And if I'm really in a pinch for time, I'll grab their ready to drink, which has 35 grams of protein, 26 vitamins and minerals, and tastes delicious. Don't just take my word for it though. People like Idris Elba, Diver CEO Stephen Bartlett, and hardest geezer who ran the entire length of Africa use this as part of their daily routine. So if you want to find out more, go to the link down below. You can get exclusive offers, like if you sign up to their subscription service, you get 10% off all future orders, and if it's your first time ordering, you get a free shaker and t-shirt. It's also now available in major retailers in the UK and the US. What are you waiting for? Go get it.